Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the delay. We were just getting things set up. So before we dive into our presentation, I wanted to highlight a little bit about the Regional Business Center. My name is Jennifer Vandergiesen, and I'm the Youth Programs Officer. So the Regional Business Center is a one-stop source for information and guidance on starting, expanding, and operating a business. We are proud to serve Greater Sudbury, Espanola, Manitoulin Island, and the surrounding areas with services including confidential one-on-one consultations, business plan support, market research, business registration, and more. We also facilitate 2 Ontario grant programs. The first one is Starter Company Plus, which offers business skills training, one-on-one coaching, and the opportunity to get a $5,000 grant. Applications will open again in January of 2026. The second program that we offer is our Summer Company program, and again, applications open in 2026. This program is offered to high school and post-secondary students between the ages of 15 to 29 who are returning to school in the fall. It also offers business skills training, one-on-one coaching, and the opportunity for $3,000 in grant funding. Our last program is a 6-month-long incubator program that helps new startups succeed with one-on-one mentoring, programming and training, networking, and events. The program is mentor-led and completely free for Greater Sudbury startups and future entrepreneurs who are under a year in operation. Applications are open right now, and you can learn more about any of our programs at regionalbusiness.ca. The Regional Business Center hosts many webinars like the one you're attending today. They are scheduled less during the summer, but we will be back to our weekly schedule in the fall. Our full event schedule and registration is on our website, but here are a few that we have coming up over the next month or two. I would now like to introduce our guest speaker for today's presentation on legal essentials, Brandy Charsley. Brandy graduated from the University of New Brunswick Faculty of Law in 2023 and was called to the Ontario Bar in June of 2024. Before attending law school, Brandy earned a Bachelor of Commerce degree from Memorial University, in which she concentrated in accounting. She is an active member of the Sudbury legal community and currently serves as a secretary for the Sudbury District Law Association. I think she is also joined by her colleague, Thomas, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'll be co-presenting with Brandy today. I work with Brandy at Desmarais Keenan, mainly in the areas of family, corporate, bankruptcy, and real estate as well. I was born and raised in Sudbury, only left for law school up in Thunder Bay. Couldn't escape Northern Ontario, like it so much here. When I'm not, I also sit on the board as vice president at United Way Centrade Northeast, where we do some amazing work in the community, assisting those with disability and experiencing homelessness and violence and all other sorts of well-deserved causes, well-deserved needs in the community. So Brandy will be presenting first. We'll just take a moment to share our screen and we'll be on our way. Thank you.
All right, I guess I'll get going. You're ready, Tom? Okay, so Thomas is controlling the presentation, so I take a little pause, you'll know to go on. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming. We're going to be discussing a number of things to consider when starting a business in Ontario and in Canada. I'm going to be talking about the different types of business structures and which type might be the best for your business. And then Thomas will be discussing some more specific topics related to operating a business in our modern world. Here, go ahead. So businesses can be structured in 3 ways. The first being sole proprietorships, the second being partnerships, and the third being corporations. Each structure comes with its own legal and financial implications, which I'm going to get into in more detail. So the first is the sole proprietorship, which is the simplest and the most common type of business structure in Ontario. In this setup, one person owns and operates the business, and legally there's no separation between the individual and the business. That means the owner is personally responsible for all debts and obligations incurred by the business. So setting up a sole proprietorship is straightforward. If you're doing business under your own legal name, for example, if I ran a business called, Brandy Charsley, I wouldn't need to register it. But if I plan to operate under a different name, like Charsley Consulting, you'll need to register the business name under the Ontario Business Names Act. And there are a lot of pros and cons of operating a sole proprietorship. Starting with the pros, the structure offers a lot of control and simplicity. As you are the sole owner, you make all the decisions and you keep all of the profits. There's no need to consult with partners or shareholders, and you're not tied to any form of governance. If you're running a small business, there's a good chance maybe this is your situation and you're the only one running the business. It's easy and it's inexpensive. You don't need to register unless you're operating under another name. And even then, the registration through Service Canada is quick and it only costs $60. Tax-wise, there are benefits too. You can deduct business expenses and losses directly from your personal income, which can reduce your taxable income. This includes losses carried forward from previous years, which can be particularly useful when you're getting started and money might be an issue. But on the con side, the most significant issue is personal liability. There's no legal distinction between you and your business. That means if the business runs into debt, creditors can come after both your business assets and your personal assets, like your savings, your home, or your car, to collect whatever debts you owe. Another drawback is how your income is taxed. So all businesses' profits are taxed at your personal income tax rate, which can be significantly higher than the corporate tax, especially as your income grows. And lastly, sole proprietorships can have limited access to funding. It's harder to raise capital or secure loans since you can't issue shares, and there's often less perceived stability or structure compared to corporations. So while this structure is ideal for low-risk ventures or solo professionals, it does come with trade-offs. And it might be a good fit at the beginning of your career and your business, but you might want to look to change to a corporation later. Okay, so when to choose a sole proprietorship? So this structure is best suited for individuals running a business on their own, especially if they want to avoid the extra paperwork, the cost, and the complexity that comes with incorporating. It's also a good option if you're comfortable with assuming personal liability and the nature of your business is low risk. For example, if you're offering professional services with minimal overhead or debt and there's little chance of legal disputes. Another key reason to choose the structure is control. If you want to make all decisions without needing input from others. Sorry, I'm getting calls. It gives you that full autonomy. And lastly, it's often the right fit for people running a part-time or side business where the income is supplemental and doesn't require formal structure or outside investment. In short, sole proprietorships work best for low-risk solo operations where simplicity, ease, and control are your priorities. So when is a sole proprietorship not the right choice? If your business has high risk, like a construction company or medical clinic, where accidents or lawsuits are more likely, you'll want to structure in a way that protects your personal assets and subjects you to less liability. If you need to raise money to grow your business, such as a tech startup looking for investors, a sole proprietorship won't, work as well because you can't sell shares to bring in, money and partners easily. If your business has multiple owners, like a law firm or a restaurant with several partners, a sole proprietorship isn't an option. You'll need a partnership or a corporation. And if you're planning for long-term growth, it might be a small business now, but you're looking to grow. Say you have a retail store and you're looking to expand into multiple locations. A corporation usually makes more sense because it's built to handle those sort of complexities. Okay, so that was sole proprietorships. Now, the second type of business structure is a partnership. And there's 3 different types of partnerships in Ontario, which are listed on the screen. And they're all governed by different legislation. First, there's the general partnership, where all partners are equally responsible for managing the business. But importantly, they all share full personal liability. That means if the business can't pay its debts or it is sued, each partner's personal assets, like their savings or their home, can be used to cover those debts. Even if only one partner caused the problem. So if one partner in your partnership gets sued, it's still going to fall on you. So they're jointly and individually liable for the actions of the business and for each other. The next type of partnership is a limited partnership, which includes 2 types of partners, general partners and limited partners. The general partners manage the business and have the same full personal liability as in a general partnership. However, limited partners are only liable to the amount they invested, and they don't participate in running the business. So if you're running a business and you want full control, like a sole proprietorship, you might have someone who invests some money into the partnership. They invest $50,000. They're only going to lose that amount, and they don't have any control. So it's an investment tool that still gives you full control of your business. And then the last type of partnership is a limited liability partnership, which offers protection for all partners. This type of partnership isn't available for all types of businesses. They're usually professional businesses like lawyers, architects, accountants, that sort of thing. So if one partner makes a mistake or faces a lawsuit, the other partner's personal assets are protected. But you're still liable for your own actions or negligence. You don't have, you're still subject to some liability. So when you're deciding what kind of partnership you want to get into, the most critical thing is to decide how much, risk you want to take and how much liability you want to be subject to make sure that you protect yourself and your assets. You can enter into a partnership agreement, which is a document that sets out the rules and the expectations between business partners. So it helps everyone understand how the partnership will work and what each partner's role is. Well, it's not legally required in Ontario. It is highly recommended. Without a written agreement, the partnership is automatically governed by the default rules set out in whatever partnership act. And these default rules may not suit the specific needs or intentions of the partners. Depending on how the business is run, one partner might want to, retain more of the income than the others, and it's all going to be split unless you have a partnership agreement. So it allows you to clearly define important aspects such as how much capital each partner contributes, how profits and losses are shared, who makes the decisions. Additionally, the agreement can set out procedures for how new partners are added or how they leave the business, and it can establish methods for resolving disputes, which when you're starting a new business can be very important. And overall, a partnership agreement helps avoid these misunderstandings and potential conflicts that could become an issue as you're looking to grow your business. Next slide, please. And the last type of business structure is a corporation. So you might be looking, to incorporate as your business grows, but the main benefit of a corporation is liability and, the ability to grow, which I'll get more into. But a corporation is a legal entity that exists separate from its owners, who are called shareholders. This means that the corporation itself can enter into contracts, own property, and it can sue and be sued, much like an individual person. For all intents and purposes, a corporation is basically its own person. It offers benefits such as limited liability, easier access to capital, and tax advantages. The corporate tax rate is lower than the personal tax rate. So if you don't incorporate and your business is making a lot of money, you could be subjecting yourself to higher taxes. Next slide. So how do you incorporate a business? So it can be incorporated online, but you can incorporate under Ontario's Business Corporations Act or the Canada Business Corporations Act. So you have different options when you're incorporating. The Ontario Act applies to corporations that are incorporated specifically in Ontario, and they're regulated by the provincial government, and any changes like amendments to the articles or bylaws are filed with Ontario. And then on the other hand, the Canadian Act governs corporations incorporated federally, and these corporations are governed by federal regulations. And choosing between provincial and federal corporation depends on factors such as where your business operates and your expansion plans. So when you're starting your business and you're deciding whether you're going to incorporate, it's going to be really, important to decide where you're going to operate and what you want the future of your business to look like. Federal incorporation has several advantages. First, it provides a consistent legal framework across all provinces and territories, which is useful if you plan to operate nationally or engage in cross-border business in other countries. It also helps businesses looking to access national markets and helps you, build a consistent brand. From a funding perspective, federal incorporation can enhance your company's credibility with investors and capital markets, which might make it easier to make money if you're looking to grow. And if you are planning to expand across Canada, federal incorporation allows you to do so without having to reincorporate your business in every province, which is something you'll have to do if you only incorporate in Ontario. So before incorporating, think about it, think about what your plans are, even though you might be a small business right now. And, finally, let's look at the pros and cons of incorporating a business. Like every legal structure, it has its positives. One of the biggest advantages is the concept of the corporate veil, which essentially means that you and your corporation are separate, unlike in other structures, which means it is a separate legal entity. So the owners or the shareholders are not personally liable for the company's debts or legal issues. So your corporation goes bankrupt, you're not going to lose your house. Corporations also make it easy to transfer ownership. So shares can be sold or passed on without disrupting the business. You might be starting a business and, you plan to sell that business. It becomes a lot easier if it's incorporated. And like I said before, from a tax perspective, corporations may qualify for lower tax rates and other tax benefits, which can help the business grow and keep more of its profits as opposed to paying taxes at your personal tax rate. However, on downside, corporations have a lot more regulatory requirements, which can be confusing and be expensive if you have to hire professionals to help you with that. You need to prepare financial statements, and you need to keep detailed corporate records and filings, which is different if you use a different business structure. There's also higher startup and ongoing costs compared to other business structures. And, finally, the process to register a corporation is more complicated, it takes longer. So while it does offer strong protection and tax advantages, it also comes with more complexity and expense. So that's all I have to say about the business structures. But when you're deciding which one you're going to choose, you might change as your business grows, but you're going to want to think about where you want to operate, how big you think the business is going to be, how much risk you're going to take, and then you can find the best structure for your business. That's everything from me, so I'll pass it off to Thomas, and he's going to be discussing some more interesting topics.
Okay, so we'll say more interesting, but definitely a broader range of topics. Very similar to last year, if anyone was in attendance. I really want to focus on what operating a business looks like in the digital world, and what some of the legal considerations and risks you need to consider when you're operating a business online. It's quite important because over the last, 10, 15 years, and using the pandemic as a tipping point. The internet marketplace and the digital, a digital place to do business is really evolving. Um, you know, uh, the internet marketplace is continuing to be consolidated into a few major retailers. A lot of businesses operate now without a traditional brick and mortar store, and that's an absolutely fine way to do business. You'll also find that, if you're bringing, digital products, you have to operate within these retailers that dominate the market. You'll have to operate within their own digital fiefdom, their own system to sell what your product is, what your technology is. That's really come across as businesses have grown their digital profiles. And really, we've seen a lot of this acceleration again, like I said, after the pandemic. It's brought about decades of change as businesses moved entirely online within, a short number of years. So in consideration of that, your business likely is going to operate entirely or in part in online. And so you need to have knowledge of what are the legal risks of operating your business online. And you need to include that in your business strategy online. So what I want to do is give a quick rundown over the next 20 minutes or so. I know last year it took me a lot longer than 20 minutes to go through this, but what I want to touch on is the rise of the gig economy. So, there's certain business models that you look at, like Uber, DoorDash, Fiverr, who hire individuals on an as-needed basis to perform a specific task. If your business has similar characteristics to those, you really need to consider do you have employees, or are you hiring independent contractors? And it is a legal risk when you think you're hiring independent contractors to work for you, but they're more like an employee. So we're gonna go through that. There's also considerations about having virtual or remote employees. Because you may be thinking about considering hiring an employee remotely, because you don't have a physical office space for them to attend. It's also cost effective to hire remote employees. You need to consider, if you're hiring an employee, what are the legislative requirements, and what are the legal risks associated with hiring someone that may work out of province or out of country. Another part of your business may revolve around data collection. The technology that you produce may, as a byproduct, collect personal data, or your entire product may be collecting data as your way of making money. When you collect personal data, there's concerns about privacy that's controlled by Canadian legislation and Ontario legislation, and we're going to run through some of those concerns. Also, there's when you're operating a business online, whether this is how you choose to, if you're selling a product with what we call terms of service or end user agreements, you may be able to draft a contract that controls how people use your products, or part of your business may be purchasing other software or some other type of license that that has a terms of service or end user agreement that might impact the data that you collect and how you can use their product in driving your own business and making money with your own business. And specifically, I'll touch briefly on the Spotify example, but I also want to talk about how AI products that you may incorporate into your business, if you do so, there may be some limitations to how you can make money with when you include those AI products in your business. Okay, so starting with the rise of the gig economy, as this gig economy grows, workers become more comfortable with short-term contracts, freelance work, or other temporary work that's arranged through maybe your business, through another online platform or mobile application. It's more and more common to have blurred lines about who is an employee and who is an independent contractor. The best way to avoid this is having a contract outlining the relationship between those who do work for you and your business. If you don't have a clear contract, it's going to come down to what the law says and what a judge looks at when they're determining if an employment relationship exists. And they look at the level of control you have over the individual, including their hours of work, where you're telling them to work, if you provided them training, if they have reporting obligations to you, whether they provide their own tools or equipment, whether that that employee has a chance of profit and risk of loss if they're performing the services, or if you're taking all that profit and risk of loss and then paying them an amount regardless of if there's a profit or loss. You also have to look, the court will also look at the integration of the worker in your business. That's all really fact specific. So like I said, define it by a contract before so you don't run into these issues. Even if, like all of law, even if there's a clear contract, you may still run into an issue if you say that they're an independent contractor. You've put that into a contract that they're an independent contractor, but you treat them as an employee. If you treat them as an employee, a court's going to find that they are an employee. And maybe I can open it up to questions if we're doing that today, but does anyone have an idea of why it's what happens if they're treated as an employee? If you raise your hand, maybe I can call on you. If not, it can be a rhetorical question. Okay, I don't see any hands up. Maybe that's just my view. Oh, I do see one. Can I recognize? Yes, you can unmute yourself with the initial CV, I believe. Maybe not.
Hi, sorry, I just want to add, our participants don't have cameras or mics enabled, so feel free to type your response in the chat.
Oh yeah, perfect. Yeah, and then I can read the chat answer out loud. Exactly. That's exactly what I was going at. What the comment was that maybe once they are an employee, they are entitled to benefits, and that's absolutely the case. It matters for your business because if they're an employee, there's employment law consequences. So what I mean by that is that employees are protected by various legislation and employment related statutes, and they also have additional rights such as ensuring minimum wage is paid for the hours worked. As their employer, you have an obligation to monitor and accurately record their hours worked. You have to accrue vacation pay. You have to ensure that they're reimbursed for out-of-pocket expenses. You have to consider just cause and termination pay if you're going to let them go. There's also holiday pay, other premium pays such as overtime pay. And those are all things you need to consider. If they're not outlined in your contract, it defaults to what that employment law legislation says. There's other employment legislation, which I've defined as protective legislation. Basically, it provides your employees or someone who's considered an employee with a complaint and dispute resolution mechanism to resolve issues encountered in their workplace. They set out employment and labor standards. It allows them to participate in different forms of public insurance and safety net programs like EI. So, like I said, if you run into a situation where they're deemed an employee, all of this begins to apply. You also have to consider their treatment, their equitable treatment under the Human Rights Code and the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. And then you're also subject to making payroll deductions on their behalf and making those withholdings and remittances under the Canada Pension Plans Act, the Employment Insurance Act, the Income Tax Act, and those are all responsibilities that you now have if you hire someone or they're deemed as an employee. This becomes significantly more complicated if your employees work remotely in another province and in another, potentially in another country, because now you have to deal with other extra-provincial legislation. Okay, so if you do intentionally hire someone in a virtual workplace, they're working from home. This has really become more commonplace. There's also benefits to having remote employees. There's some considerations that you need to have. One, like I said before, if they're not in Ontario, let's say they're in BC or another province, there's different employment standard obligations that you need to that don't exist in Ontario. So, for example, while the Employment Standards Act in Ontario has you're required to pay them for 3 unpaid sick days. If they're in BC, there's 3 unpaid sick days and 5 paid sick days. So that's you have to consider that because that's a significant cost to you. There's also different payroll obligations in different provinces, and then there's also this idea where it's called a risk, it's called permanent establishment. And if those employees that you hire in another province have agency or control of your business, they enter into contracts, a court may deem that they are that your business is established in the province or country that they operate in that's other than Ontario. And then if you're deemed, you have a deemed permanent establishment in another country, there are significant tax reporting obligations that you have to consider. So, I mean, my advice at this point is just, if you're going to hire someone from out of province, talk to a lawyer or your accountant before you do that. There's also accommodations. Workplace accommodations aren't unfamiliar. Business owners do have to deal with those if they're hiring employees. This extends to people working in remote offices. So, I mean, the purpose of the duty to accommodate is to ensure that people who are fit to work are not unfairly excluded, where working conditions can be adjusted by their employer without undue hardship. There are situations where remote individuals can be accommodated and should be accommodated. And it might be your obligation as an employer to accommodate them, even if you don't have a physical office and and they work for you. This could extend to their home. But what matters is without undue hardship. That is really what the analysis focuses on. So again, fact specific, case by case. If you're unsure if you have a duty to accommodate, again, talk to a lawyer, which I think I'm going to say a lot of. If you do have people working from home, you might consider if you're allowed to monitor them or not, and what they're doing in their office space at home, what they're doing on their home network. You're permitted to monitor them to what's reasonable and necessary. And there's some justification involved. If we're thinking about data collection, privacy concerns, about your business, the online security threats. You don't want individuals accessing information they shouldn't. There is definitely a need to monitor and establish remote work that people are doing for you. One of the major points of concern that everyone should be aware of is that there's the potential that if your employee has an unsecured network, they're using computers that others may use, or they're forwarding information outside the workplace server that you may have developed. People can access that information. And when I start talking about immediately after this about data collection, you're open to liability if, as the business owner, if people have taken personal information of individuals that wasn't properly protected. So one of the best ways to manage your liability is to have a good security protocol if you're going to hire remote workers or if you're doing business online in general. So on that note, I talked about personal data that you collect. A lot of businesses now, whether it's the sole purpose of their business to collect people's data and use it for their products, or that a byproduct of making those sales, selling their data, signing up for accounts that help, customize the product to the individual's need, you're collecting what is called identifiable data. And in Canada, that's data that describes an individual in a personal capacity, or that would reveal something of a personal nature. And it's reasonable to expect that an individual can be identified from that information, either having that information by itself or taking bits and pieces of it and combining it all together. So think about that account that someone signs up for to your online service that you're providing. It has their name, it has their address, it has their sex. It's identifiable data. And so as soon as you collect that, you have an obligation under privacy legislation in Ontario and in Canada. Some of the things that you need to ensure that you do is that you need to have an explicit agreement with your customer about why their information is being collected and how it's going to be used. And you need their clear consent that you can collect their data. And if we're thinking about how that practically works online, that's a checkbox saying I agree to providing this data. Anytime we make purchases on new websites, we're clicking that box. Okay. The other thing you can do to protect yourself and your business is that when you have that individual's consent to collect their data, ensure that you're only using it for the limited purposes for what the customer gave their consent to. When you have their personal information, secure it safely with safeguards like passwords, or potentially physical barriers if you still print everything off and want to use paper like that. And also ensure that your online platform has firewalls, your network has firewalls, to protect that data and to secure it. If you have employees, make sure you have a policy drafted. A lawyer can do that to ensure that you have clear instructions to your employee about how they can collect and store data, and make sure it's, the lawyer would make sure it's drafted in a way that meets that privacy framework. And one of the things you might be tempted to do as a growing business is to send out bulk emails or mass emails advertising your business. There's specific legislation in Canada that deals with that. You have to ensure that the list that you have of potential customers has opted into you sending that information, and it's you can't just send it to them and provide them with the option to opt out. It has to be that you have their consent first to send that information. So lots of risks with collecting data, lots of requirements for you to secure it and store it correctly. You may ask, why is it worth collecting? What is it? Is it worth the hassle? Data is described as the world's most valuable resource. And I think that's true. If you think about all the online marketplaces that we enter into, all the smart devices that we have, all of that data is collected and stored. And sometimes, when we're thinking about free to use programs, it's not because it's not the free to use program that they're making money on. It's collecting your data and selling it. And if this is part of your business model, it could be the main driver of your income. And so collecting data is really important, and it could be very valuable. And it can also form your property. And the data that you can collect can be copyrighted in the way that you use it. So it's important to understand that if you are going to collect data, you should consider copyrights as a way of protecting and claiming rights in your commercially acquired data that you've collected from customers. And like I said, you can do that through a copyright. You can also do that through a trade secret. And I just want to talk about those briefly right now. First of all, very few copyright lawyers in Sudbury. It's very technical, but basically you can have a copyright on the data that you've compiled, formatted, and extracted, so that you can protect the work that data allows you to produce. Not everything can be copyrighted, so it definitely, if your business is really technical this way, talk to a copyright lawyer, talk to an IP intellectual property lawyer. They're expensive. But if you see growth in your company's future, it's worth going to talk to someone, but expect the thousands of dollars to have a lawyer draft those agreements. They're not cheap. You also may want to look at something less formal, like a trade secret. Trade secrets don't require formal legal documentation to file that that right to the property, and it's like I said, informal. But basically, a trade secret is any private information that your business uses to give itself a competitive advantage. So it could be your customer lists and pricing preferences for those customers, your business strategies and opportunities. If you have you want to sell some type of food item, it could be your recipes, it could be your formulas, it could be your code in your computer software. It could even be methods and processes. Basically, for a trade secret to exist, you have to treat it as confidential and proprietary. It must be communicated in confidence, and it must not be in the public domain. So you can do this by marking it as confidential, restricting physical electronic access to that trade information. Again, set up passwords, restricted servers, monitor and create firewalls and networks. And then again, going back to if you have employees or that it's part of some way part of what you sell to your consumers. Draft non-disclosure agreements to protect that trade secret information. And just to kind of the last thing I want to talk about, kind of on that way of being careful with what you've produced, what your product is. I have this example of Spotify purchasing this audiobook company called Findaway Voices. Basically, a summary is people were able to go to Findaway Voices and publish their book there. And they would then turn it into an audiobook that could be sold. And when it was acquired by Spotify, Spotify updated the terms of service to your Findaway Voices contract and basically said, everything that you do and upload to this site, we can do whatever we want with this. And they used it using that language you see on the screen. Very hard to understand. But basically they said, if you upload your book to this website, we can make a movie out of it. We can make a TV show out of it. We can distribute it anywhere in the world, and you're not going to see $1 for it. And so if you just clicked on that terms of service and for example, any terms of service, and you gave away your trade secrets, that really limits, someone like Spotify or another company that wants to take advantage of you. Just by clicking that terms of service, that could be, you could lose what you've worked so hard to produce. So my advice is read what you sign before you sign it. And if you have any questions, talk to a lawyer. Now, on the flip side of this, and this is the last thing that I'm going to say because I think we're running out of time here. But if you're going to incorporate some type of AI tool in what you're providing to your customer, you have to consider how those tools are licensed. A lot of AI now is built on open source terms, which means they're free to use and they're free to use for yourself, but they're not free from obligation. So if you're incorporating a tool that is an AI tool that is the basis of or has a strong basis in the product that you're providing to a customer, you may not be able to, under the terms of using that AI license, earn money or on that software that you're using. So specifically, I learned about this just in some reading recently about copyleft. Rather than copyright, it's called copyleft. And basically, these are one of the big contracts that allows people to use OpenAI software and free to use AI software. And basically what copylefting does is it takes advantage of your freedom to contract by making the terms of the copyleft license that you agree to use when you download that program to say that anyone redistributing the software, whether or not the software has been changed, must give anyone must give all future users the freedom to use, distribute, and make changes to that software without legal recourse. So if you've built a tool based on a tool that has that copyleft license built in, you're not allowed to make money on it. And really, if your focus is going to be on AI, building an AI tool for whatever that is, the only way you can absolutely avoid this is by working from the ground up, whether that's with a developer or with or on your own, and building that tool from the ground up to ensure that all the data that's collected from using that tool is or making sure that if you're selling that AI tool itself to someone else, to another platform, you have the full rights to do that without being subject to these open use licenses. So essentially, that concludes my portion of the presentation. There's always time to take questions. Both Brandy and I can take questions, which we'll review in the chat.
Thomas, I think there's a couple of questions in the chat for you already.
Oh, perfect. I just need to have a look at that, and we will. Okay. Okay, so I see Kara asked the question about providing nursing care. Do you need to have a consent form signed by the patient in order to keep documentation regarding their treatment? That's a really good question. If you're providing nursing care on your, as your own business, yes. The short answer is yes. There's a specific type of provincial legislation that you're dealing with, and it's the Personal Healthcare Information Protection Act, which deals with any medical information that you're collecting from your patients. And there's specific rules that you need to consider in that legislation to keep their data safe and protected. If you're working with other healthcare providers, it's also important to have consent to share that information with those other healthcare providers. That may already be the healthcare provider that you're working with may already have one of those agreements, but without the consent of your patient to share that information between healthcare providers, you shouldn't be doing it. So I hope that it answers your question. And so I don't see any other questions coming through. I think we can give it a couple moments in case people have questions.
Tom, I think there's one more question.
Okay, perfect. Okay, it did answer the question, and I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name, but we were asked, as a newly incorporated company with the first anniversary, what are some legal obligations that are due? So minute book completion, financial statements, tax return filings, annual returns. I can run through this briefly, but basically you should be updating your minute book yearly. You have an obligation to update your minute book with a confirmation that you filed financial statements and that the officers have approved those financial statements. Tax returns, you should be doing them every year. Again, it's part of that corporate obligation. And then and that basically, unless there's significant changes like transfers or sales of shares, anytime you pay a dividend, that should be recorded in the minute book. I mean, that'll be recorded in your financial statement. So that, you know, that really covers the bulk of it, is every year making sure that your tax returns are done and your minute book is updated saying that those tax returns are done. Now, this isn't, it's not good advice. It's really your obligation to do this. And there's no one that's going to be checking every year that that this is done. Where it becomes an issue, and where we see an issue frequently, is when the corporation doesn't update their minute book for 10, 15 years. And so the accountant and the lawyer have to work together, probably spend upwards of $20,000 reconstructing your minute book over the last 15 years. And if you want to sell your business, if your business is coming to an end, it's going to delay it because it's going to take a lot of time. And obviously, there's that's one reason why you want to do it. Another reason is from an accounting perspective, tax perspective. If you're making money and you're not paying taxes on the money that you're earning, the CRA will reassess you at some point. They have the resources to do it, and you're paying tax and penalties on that undeclared tax, which, if you're paying yourself dividends, has an impact on your personal tax, and it can be a mess. So just file your taxes and update your minute books.
There was one more question that came in from an import-export business of customized products, and they were wondering what the legal requirements were for compliance and business set up in Canada.
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, that was one. Importing and exporting, I will be, you know, it's not something our firm deals with. I think, you know, broadly speaking, what your main obligations are going to be is declaring those items, and, you know, just broadly speaking here, and making sure that, you know, the appropriate tax rate is applied to those items that you're bringing in. Other than that, you know, it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse. But if you know, definitely encourage you to send an email to Brandy or I. We can look into it, give you a broad overview. You know, we want to be as helpful as we can, so we can I can have a look into that for you and at least steer you in the right direction. Or I can put my email in the chat for anyone that wants to reach out if they want to retain our office for any reason, have any follow-up questions. Okay, so mine's in the chat.
That's perfect.
And Charlie at dklawyers.ca. Okay, there we go.
And I think that was it for the questions. So thank you so much for your time. That was really informative. We really appreciated having you here.
Thank you for having us.
And I hope everyone has a great afternoon.